Now we want to take a look at how these businesses perform through time. It's a little bit problematic to look at dynamics on the business model canvas, but they do give us extremely useful insights. This is the fitness club example we had gone through earlier before the pivot. You'll see membership contracts are the primary revenue source. And we can go in this example and look at the actual books and plot out sales. You'll see sales for 2 months over on the right, expenses over on the left, 2 months actual expenses, and you'll see what's more important, which is the difference between the two, the actual cash flow. Now I've put that in the center as part of the value proposition. This is really the value to the model owner. If we continue on doing this, looking at their records for 6 months prior to the pivot, we'll see cash flow goes up and down. We'll perform the pivot now, and the primary revenue stream has become personal training. We see cash flows go up and down, but on an ongoing increasing basis. In fact, just looking at the cash flow graph, you can tell easily that there's more money coming in, much more easily than trying to look at the sales graph and look at the expense graph. If we attempt to summarize this, we can say, well, comparing the 6 months before the pivot to the 6 months after the pivot, revenues increased by 22%. Expenses also increased, but only by 11%. The actual cash flow that went to the owner was an additional 11% of sales. In fact, doing a similar thing in another facility, we've seen it increase 14% of sales. So it's not hard to summarize the dynamics of this particular model by saying within the first year you should be able to see an increase of 10 to 15% of sales going into cash in the bank. Now, this is pretty nice if you have an actual experience, but if you're working with concepts above the line, then what we're going to have to do is something a little different. We're going to have to reach into a different type of modeling, business simulation, in order to try to construct something for below the line. And to do that, we're going to have to go to a slightly different platform. Now we're looking through a web browser at an internet site. The site is insightmaker.com, and looking at the InsightMaker application. It starts as a blank canvas. I've used the text tool to sketch out a business model canvas, made some modifications below the line. You'll see this blue box called value retained. That is a stock. A stock accumulates value, and the purpose here is going to be just like that cash flow diagram in the middle of the last example. We're going to show what the result is between money coming in or any kind of value coming in and those values going out. Now, the way we add to any stock is with an inbound flow, and that's represented with an arrow going into the stock. In this case, I used money as an example. We're using that for our business models, and you'll see a little dotted arrow from the value retained stock back to the cash receipts flow. And what we'll do is use something like interest as an example of something that could increase value. All right, as the value retained in the stock increases, well, the amount of interest that's going in each period also increases. And what we have is a reinforcing loop here, which is generally represented by a little plus sign or a little avalanche snowball icon like we have here. And we will see that this will cause that value retained to increase value over time. If we calculate it over one step of time, you'll see the value initially starts at 1 there and in a linear fashion does go up. This is what would happen if we valued a model before a pivot and after a pivot. We'd get these 2 points like that. However, if I added more steps, in this case 10 steps, you'd see it's really not a straight line. There's more of a slight bend to it. That bend is very significant, so what we're going to do is accentuate it by taking this out over 100 steps, and you'll see this exponential growth curve, which is generally called the hockey stick curve. If you have a business model that in fact does have positive feedback and will grow, it will probably grow in this manner and not in a linear fashion like you might model it in Excel. You'll see over on the left-hand side, in the beginning, it may feel like nothing is happening. And it's important at this point to understand that you have the acorn problem expressed mathematically. All right, you can't look inside at the seed stage and understand where it is you're going to end up. The model is going to be extremely important at this point in the growth curve, because what you do is you're going to model out where your customers are and where your key partners are, and you're going to go to them during this period of time and get information back from them that will tell you, indeed, are we delivering value or are we wasting our time? Now let's look at an outbound flow, and we'll see what we had as costs. I've changed to limiting value. And of course, there is our costs, which are just regular expenses going out. But I've added another feature here on this outbound flow, and that's the concept of a capacity. You can't grow forever. Everything has some limits. So if you're a service business and you have your time, you're stuck to 24 hours a day. You can go ahead and schedule that 25th hour, but nothing's going to happen. And these loops that have a capacity in them are called balancing loops. And when they're combined with a growth loop, we get a modification to the curve. It looks like this. This is called an S-curve. What we see is the initial growth phase, followed by capacity starting to affect us. There's a popular management philosophy called theory of constraints, which says if you've grown in the past but now you have stopped, there's a capacity somewhere, and anything you do that doesn't affect that capacity, which is constraining the growth, is just simply a waste. Okay, all you're going to do is make the capacity just limit more and more growth. You're not going to actually retain any more value. So it's important to understand and grab that insight from this dynamic structure. Now, there's another way of looking at this, which is going to be apparent in all personal models. The difference between an individual model and a business model is the individual is always limited by themselves. And I'm going to represent that as the key resource grit. If you have begun an enterprise, there's something inside you we've been calling grit, whether it's determination, creativity, courage, whatever. And that allows you to go forward against the slow areas of the growth curve and continue to increase the value of your enterprise. However, like the grit on sandpaper, as you use it, it's consumed. All right, the sandpaper begins to wear out as you use it, and you have to rub harder and longer, which causes the grit to be consumed even faster, until eventually there's a little or no grit left. And if we represent the consumption of you against these other loops, what you're going to see is that the value retained will increase, it will peak, and then it will decline. Now, if this is all that happened, it would be kind of a sad scenario. What's the point of going through the effort if it's just going to dissipate away? And it also represents one of the many limitations of a model. A model has a scope, and it doesn't go beyond the scope. If we look at the way we've diagrammed the key resources, we'll see the grit resource and then wearing as an outflow. But where does it outflow to? If we left the model like this, we would say it outflows to something outside the scope of the model. But in fact, it is going somewhere. Where is that? This is a very important feature of your career. Where it's going is into your life experience. As this particular mechanism may begin to wear down, you personally are also building up your stock of experience. And that stock of experience becomes the basis of a revised personal business model and a revised enterprise. What we want to do now is not look at the model in terms of what should we be getting into, but let's examine this curve for a moment and talk about when we should be getting out of something. Now, this can be downloaded, and then what we'll do is take a look at it. We'll go ahead and expand the graph, and for the purpose of illustration, make an assumption that the amount of time it takes to get through the growth section of this curve will be something equal to the amount of time it takes to exit out of it. Now, if we wait until we actually feel the right-hand descent side, we might start to exit where the red star is located, and given the same amount of time to exit, we might exit out somewhere here. And you'll see that creates a very significant loss of time and value. These are life values you can never get back. And in fact, if this happens multiple times over the course of your life, it can add up to something very, very significant. We've called these sessions Fit for Life because personal business modeling is a necessary life skill in today's economy that you're going to have to repeat over and over again. If you knew where the peak was, then what you could do is actually backtrack your exit time back from the peak and know that you need to exit here. Unfortunately, you cannot know that. But what you can do is continue to go through the exercises that we've given you here in Fit for Life and continue to apply the increasing stock of experience resources that you're gaining throughout your business experience to see if you can't find better and better ways to create value for other people. And as you do that, you'll be able to sense not that this is the correct exit time because I know I'm going to be peaking out and going down, but you'll be able to realize, oh, now's the time for a new entrance, and that becomes the rationale for then exiting before you feel like it. Hope you've gained from all these sessions. We've got in the supplemental materials some places to go for information on business models, personal business models, and in fact simulations like you've just seen here. These are life skills. You will be referring back to them over and over again. Udemy provides these sessions for you so that you can actually go back and review them as well. And with that, we wish you all the best in your life's endeavors. Thank you.